The name of my presentation is the Inca administration of the Middle Cañete Valley, Peru. I will share my results from a preliminary analysis I made as part of my dissertation research in Peru. The Cañete Valley is located 150 kilometers south of Lima City. It is a typical central Peruvian coastal valley. It runs east from higher altitudes in the Andes to west until it reaches the Pacific Ocean. In this map, you can see the middle and lower sections of the valley. The lower section is a plain that has been artificially irrigated for centuries, and in the middle section, there is a very narrow valley with some seasonal active ravines. For this presentation, I will focus on the middle valley. This is a very arid area with almost no rainfall but very productive soils in the valley bottom, allowing intensive agricultural production. Due to this aridity, preservation of archaeological materials is very good. The history of archaeological research in this valley can be divided in three phases. The first is a group of early descriptions of sites in the valley and materials from them. Most of these were conducted by amateur researchers that were highly influenced by descriptions made by Spanish writers during colonial times. The second phase includes much intensive research by archaeologists such as Joy Marcus in Cerro Azul el Guarco, an important monumental site next to the sea, and John Hislop in Incahuasi, a regional administrative center in the Middle Valley. However, these two important researchers were heavily influenced by Maria Rostorowski's ethnohistorical study of the Guarco and Lunahuná señoríos or kingdoms, in the lower and middle valleys respectively. She argues that two autonomous political entities occupied the valley before the arrival of the Incas. Both Marcus and Hislop use this reference, although there is no clear evidence for Rostorowski's claims. Finally, it is fundamental to mention Williams and Merino catalog of sites. This is the most complete survey of the lower and middle Cañete valleys and has been fundamental for my own research. Finally, the third phase includes a group of many recent studies. Most of them can be found in the Cuadernos del Capagnan journal. A special mention for the work of the Proyecto Capagnan that have been excavating the Cerro Azul site for many seasons, and the Proyecto Archaeológico Incahuasi that have conducted more intensive excavation in the site. It is important to mention that many of the studies in this phase are more critical about Rostorowski's model. Although there have been changes in research goals and objectives, most of the studies in Cañete have been targeted to excavate key monumental sites. While this has been fundamental to understand important aspects of late pre-Hispanic occupation, there have been few studies that try to understand the organization and administration of a territory and the construction of an imperial landscape. Because of this, I propose this research question. I believe that a regional approach will provide new insights about the variability of reactions that local groups had towards Inca colonization in the Middle Valley. In this map, you can see the study area. The dots represents all the archaeological sites identified from different periods. I must say that this is the result of two survey seasons in 2018 and 2019. I did not cover the complete Middle Valley, but almost 75% of its complete area. I was supposed to survey the rest last year, but COVID-19 prevented me from doing this. In my analysis, I focused on sites from the late Hispanic occupations. I performed a set of different GIS analyses after creating two main datasets: local leaders' residences and Inca administrative facilities. I will focus on the latter in this presentation. Here you can see the location of Inca administrative facilities in the Middle Valley. This category of sites can be divided into four types. The first is a regional administrative center, and the only site of this type is the site of Incahuasi, represented by the wild dot in this map. Then we have tambos. By tambos, I refer to these enclosed buildings located close to the Inca Road. They have a unique entrance to an open space or plaza that is surrounded by square rooms and storages. They were probably outposts for Inca officials or caravans that transported products. We have also isolated storage complexes. These are sets of storages located in two or more lines at the mountain slopes. They also have rectangular areas probably for drying products or counting them before storing. Because they are on these slopes, they have great visibility of the valley. Finally, we have administrative centers. They are bigger sites, between 1 to 2 hectares, and have different buildings that include open spaces or plazas, storage complexes, and possible dwelling areas. Their layout is similar to the one of Incahuasi, but at a smaller scale. It is also important to mention that the construction materials in these sites can vary. Although the majority of them were built using cutted stones and mud, they can also include other construction materials like adobes or tapia. I aim to understand whether there existed clusters of sites or not. First, I created kernel surfaces that allow me to visualize areas where possible clustering of sites existed. This map shows the results. There are 3 clear clusters and 1 not so clear, which is this one. An interesting result is the place Incahuasi has in its cluster. It is located at a very marginal area, which is something strange for a 30-hectare regional administrative center. Because of these results, I also made an intervisibility analysis to see if the same clustering pattern repeats. And it did in almost all clusters except for the one with Incahuasi in it. This was here. This intervisibility analysis has divided the latter cluster in 2. We have 4 sites with intervisibility relationships, and we can also count this one since it's very close to the others. And we have a second group of sites with no intervisibility relationships with other sites that includes the site of Incahuasi. This absence of intervisibility relationships for Incahuasi seems like something really unlikely for such a big and important site. The problem, in this case, seems to be preservation. 2 sites have been identified across the river in front of Incahuasi. These sites have been destroyed by mudslides and by local landowners who wanted to expand agricultural productive lands. Although some architecture can be seen on surface, it is impossible to define function nor chronology for these sites. However, Williams and Merino describe these sites as being part of the late intermediate period and late horizon. These sites have excellent visibility relationships with Incahuasi and the other 2 sites in front of them. What I have just explained made me decide to use these clusters based on intervisibility relationships as possible Inca administrative units. The next step was to model Inca administrative units. But for doing that, I needed to understand what the central site in each cluster was. For that, I used a core periphery analysis. I created least cost paths that I used in this analysis to get a cornice value. The higher the cornice value, the more core the site is in each cluster. The analysis was done in each cluster individually. In this table, you can see the cornice values and in red, the site with the higher value. What is interesting to notice is that every site with high cornice value corresponds to the type administrative center. With the center site in each cluster identified, I created these Thyssen polygons based on the cost of movement, and I got these units in which the territory was probably divided during the Inca occupation. However, the site of Incahuasi again falls in a very marginal position. Since Incahuasi is such a big and clearly important site in the valley, and knowing that all central places were administrative sites, I decided to do this modeling again, but this time including Incahuasi as a center place. In this map, just the 3 sites that had no intervisibility relationships fall inside this new unit, with Incahuasi as the center place. These administrative units are very similar in area. These results show a possible model of Inca division administration of a territory. The most relevant contribution of this study, however, appears when we compare these Inca datasets to the datasets of local leaders' residences. This table shows how many of these leaders' residences fall inside of each Inca administrative unit. While there are clusters with many leaders' residences inside, there are others with none of them. These residences, on the contrary to Inca sites, are not visible with each other and, in some cases, neither visible to Inca sites. Besides, all of these local sites, except for one, have clear evidence of occupation during the late horizon. Based on this evidence, we can argue that there were two different layers of administration coexisting during the late Horizon. Although the data I have was very limited, the results from this analysis provide a possible model for Inca administration of the Middle Valley. However, this raises other relevant questions about Inca occupation of the Middle Valley. Why were there two layers of administration coexisting in the same territory? How different is one from the other? Were they autonomous from each other? Why did the Incas invested so much in new administrative facilities? The data I presented is not enough to answer these questions yet. Nonetheless, I can provide a sort of hypothesis regarding the Inca occupation of the Middle Cañete Valley. As many have pointed out before, the Inca strategies for incorporation and governance vary depending on different circumstances. Cases are known in which the Inca promote local leaders as agents of the empire, as a mechanism to reduce administrative costs, as is the case of the neighboring Chincha Valley. However, the Middle Cañete Valley presents a different scenario. It is clear that local leaders had some autonomy from Inca officials. The residences vary between 2 to 5 hectares in area, and I could identify not only dwelling areas but also plazas, storage complexes, and food preparation areas. Even though there are architectural features that replicate Inca canons, some sort of Incanization of sites, these were built without the quality found in Inca administrative centers in the valley. This makes it unlikely to believe that Inca officials reside in these settlements. Also, I should mention that the majority of the identified sites in the Middle Cañete Valley corresponds to a late horizon. The nature of earlier occupations is not clear. Some heavily looted funerary structures have been found with Cerro de Oro style surface ceramics that correspond to the early intermediate period and middle horizon. Besides, a possible hilltop fortification was identified with the same style of surface ceramics. However, the latter has been heavily destroyed to build a radio and TV antenna, leaving only the two lines of walls around the hill. Regarding local leaders' residences, it is not possible to argue that they were occupied during the LIP because of the limited nature of the data I collected. A possible hilltop village has been identified close to the Incahuasi site. The scars of surface ceramics corresponds to the LIP, but the density of shards is too little to confirm an LIP occupation. As a hypothesis, I suggest that the reasons that the Incas built a set of administrative facilities is because the Middle Cañete Valley had a low density of occupation before their arrival. The environmental conditions of this region allow intensive production of three important crops for the Incas: maize, chili peppers, and coca leaves. Excavations in the enormous storage complexes of Incahuasi by Alejandro Chu and in some isolated storage complexes by José Luis Díaz confirm the importance of these crops. I believe the Incas resettled the population from both the middle and lower sections of the valley in order to exploit their agricultural capacity as much as they could. In this process, the Incas might have aggrandized some of the local leaders of the Middle Cañete and sponsored the construction and expansion of their residences. But still, why having two different ways of organizing the territory? I suggest that while the Inca organization dealt with the extraction and administration of agricultural surplus, the local layer was in charge of administration of local ceremonial activity and local communal works. In this way, an imperial landscape is built, in which the Incas are seen as providers and optimal reciprocators, while establishing at the same time a physical differentiation between colonized and colonizers. Of course, this hypothesis needs further investigation and the collection of new datasets, which I aim to do for my doctoral research. I don't want to end this presentation without thanking the Department of Anthropology, the Center for International Studies, and the Arts and Science Grad Students Organization from the University of Pittsburgh that provided me the funds for this research. I also want to thank Mr. Oscar Rivas that helped me with the logistics arrangements for the fieldwork. Finally, I thank Dr. Mark Berman and Dr. Elizabeth Arkush for providing me with guidelines and important comments for this research. Thank you so much for watching.